same-sex marriage. Now you're for it. You defended President Obama's immigration policies. Now you say they're too harsh. You supported his trade deal dozens of times. You even called it the gold standard. Now suddenly last week you're against it. Will you say anything to get elected?
Well, actually, I have been very consistent over the course of my entire life. I have always fought for the same values and principles.
He's in my house. He didn't knock. He didn't enter. I have two police officers here with gloves and tasers, folks. I have two police officers with gloves and tasers. Wilkes-Barre Police, they have gloves on. Do you have a warrant?
Yes, we have a
warrant. Can I see the warrant as I sit here? Can I see it, sir?
Please stand.
Sir, I am on Facebook Live right now, and there are 18 people. I'm not standing. I want to see the warrant. I have three.
Listen, we have a warrant. Take you into custody for a mental health evaluation.
They have a warrant to take me into custody for a mental health evaluation. Can I see the warrant? I haven't seen any other warrants. I am not. You came into my house illegally. Folks, you're seeing something play out here on Facebook Live that this is going to keep playing. This is going to keep playing out. Guys, who signed? No, sir. I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to shoot. I'm not, for sure, I'm not going to fight.
Okay, so this happened on the 19th. I have yet to find anything where he, and this is the going on the 29th now, so this is going on 10 days. I've yet to find anything that says that he's been released. I'll tell you what, I will give a quick look. So I did a search here, and I'll search under videos because if anything's out there. So there's nothing under videos. Just let me try real quick typing released. Maybe I'll find something. L-E-A. What is that? An S? Released. Or here, I'll type released. That'll give us everything. Okay. This is from 6 days ago. No, wait a minute, did I? Sorry people, but I need to make sure I do this right. So, I mean, basically I have not found anything to suggest that the poor guy has been released yet, and it's going on 10 days, like I said. I keep forgetting to do something. Keep forgetting to come down here and say past 24 hours. Okay, this is 21 hours ago. It says still missing. 13 hours ago, where is Andy Ostrowski? 10 hours ago, where is Andy Ostrowski? I still don't see anything. I mean, I'm desperately trying to find out if these people have let him go yet. They don't have anything on him. I mean, the guy just doesn't like him, and has obviously made that clear to them in no uncertain terms. He thinks they're corrupt, and just by saying that a federal judge or a whatever judge is corrupt, that can get you in a lot of trouble. Unfortunately, we don't have freedom of speech in this country. There's all kinds of laws and they're using this mental health evaluation system. I mean, imagine if you're powerful, you can go and I guess get anybody to just say that somebody is a threat to themselves or the community, and then you don't even have to get anything from a judge. All you have to do is get something from a doctor. A doctor, really? You're breaking into somebody's house and dragging them out and taking them to a hospital. These are cops. These are I forget what the name of the county is, but the town is Wilkes-Barre, something like that. Anyway, these are the cops dragging him out of his house, holding him indefinitely in a mental facility. I guess it's got bars, or maybe they just tell him he can't leave. I don't know. I mean, nobody knows. That's just it. There's been one, I'm gonna let my little text-to-speech thing read this off to you. This is the closest I've come to having anything about what happened to him, because it talks about somebody talked to him in a hospital somewhere afterwards. So I'll leave that for you right now.
Judicial reform activist and attorney abducted by police while broadcasting September 28, 2017 by Janet Fallon. Judicial reform activist and radio personality Andy Ostrowski has been taken into custody against his will and forced into a psychiatric evaluation. His abduction took place yesterday, September 19, at approximately 3 p.m. in Wilkes-Barre, PA, where Ostrowski resides. Ostrowski was taken while on Facebook Live and the incident was captured on video. The video is available here. The video reveals an obviously anxious Ostrowski stating he had just seen a Wilkes-Barre police officer climbing over his fence. He says, "I am staying on Facebook Live here till someone pulls me off the air. Andy Ostrowski has done nothing wrong to anyone," he says on the video. Andy Ostrowski has done nothing but hit enter on females and things on Facebook. At that juncture, Ostrowski suddenly stated that two police officers had just entered his house, wearing gloves and carrying tasers in the background. One can hear the officers ordering him to stand up while he repeatedly asks to see the warrant. One then hears the off-camera officer saying he has a warrant to take him into custody for a mental health evaluation. The camera then goes dark. Ostrowski was reached a couple hours later at the General Hospital Crisis Unit. According to Ostrowski, he was not shown a valid, signed warrant for his detention. He discussed the history of the efforts in Wilkes-Barre to deprive him of his freedom, stating that he was being held as a political prisoner. In a wide-ranging conversation, he talked about his career as a civil rights attorney and how his efforts to impact racial discrimination very likely got him suspended from the practice of law. In 2010, "I was representing minority business contractors," he stated, "and their bids, which were really good, were being systematically rejected." The lawsuits he filed put him in direct opposition with Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge, who later became director of the Department of Homeland Security. Speaking of what he uncovered as a racial agenda, Ostrowski said, "We are looking at world domination by white men." Ostrowski previously hosted the radio show on Twig's Cafe, which discussed issues surrounding legal corruption. He recently made what he termed a Declaration of Independence from the United States, which he states is occupied by a foreign power. In July of this year, he filed a federal lawsuit naming the American system of justice as a primary defendant. Ostrowski had teamed up with noted civil rights attorney Don Bailey, whose battle for his law license got national press coverage. Bailey, the former Pennsylvania congressman, was disbarred by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2014 for making statements that judges were corrupt.
Okay, so I went to his Twitter page. You know, I'm trying to find anything new, but everything's blacked out. Just absolutely blacked out. They must have taken away... I mean, he doesn't seem to be particularly internet savvy anyway. He doesn't seem to have built up, he doesn't seem to have the kind of following I have on Facebook. Whereas he used Facebook, but he only had 38 or 48 followers or something. Anyway, so I found it really interesting, though, this article that he posted on Twitter, his last post on Twitter on December 14th, 2016. I mean, we're talking nearly a year ago already. And I just found the post very telling because, you know, I've been trying to piece together just exactly what he really did, not what... I mean, they don't really want to say what he did. They're just trying to say he's some kind of nut, right? So it's called How Far Can Criticism of Judges Go Under Ethic Rules? And you know, why should anything be covered by rules? I mean, make it a law. None of this stuff about rules. You know, rules are made to be broken, and rules are so often just a joke. When you talk about, like, Congress and stuff, and they talk about, well, how they can just screw everybody just by changing a rule. No, they don't even have to pass it through Congress. They can just change the rules. It's enough of this shit, man. You know, that's what Andy is really in trouble for, is he keeps addressing these things. And he was a lawyer, and he was brilliant, and that's what got him in trouble, you know? And obviously his conscience got him in trouble with a bunch of very crooked people, and some of it is really crooked because some of the shit that was going down with this pay for little kids, and if we knew the truth, we'd probably find out that not only were they basically abducting little kids in order to get to justify taking taxpayer money for holding them in private prisons, but on top of that, and this is all down in Louisiana, I believe, where this is about. Well, how do we know that if they'll go that far to do that, how do we know in these prisons that they're not also running pedophile rings? How do we know they're not doing stuff like that? I mean, they're bad people, right? Who knows what the fuck they're doing to all these, and what the fuck they're doing, period. So I thought this was a really interesting article, and I'll talk to you about it a little bit, but I'm going to post it in my news show so that you can just listen to it.
How far can criticism of judges go under ethics rules? December 2016 by David L. Hudson Jr. and Share 330 print. Watch What You Say illustration by Sam Ward. When an attorney in Louisiana filed appellate pleadings that alleged misconduct by the trial judge in a case, It was the attorney, not the judge, who found herself in ethics hot water with the state Supreme Court. But some leading ethics and First Amendment experts and even two dissenting justices of the Louisiana Supreme Court suggest that the disciplinary action against attorney Christine M. Meyer was inappropriate under the language of Rule 8.28 of the Aber Model Rules of Professional Conduct. The Louisiana Rules of Professional Conduct follow Model Rule 8.2 word for word. The ABA Model Rules are the primary basis for binding ethics rules in almost every state, although California sets forth its rules using a different format from the Model Rules. According to pleadings filed with the Louisiana Supreme Court, Meyer filed an appeal in the Louisiana Court of Appeal that included vigorous criticisms of Phyllis Keedy, the district court judge who presided over the family law case in which Meyer was representing one of the parties. Judge Keedy now is a judge on the state appeals court. Meyer thought Judge Keedy failed to disclose the extent of her family's relationship with a litigant on the other side of the case. The appeals court later ordered Keedy removed from the case because of the community interest. Meyer filed a motion that asked Judge Keedy to recuse herself from the case, which Keedy refused. When Meyer requested a copy of the hearing record, she received a recording that contained a statement that she thought was not actually made at the hearing. The recording apparently had been spliced at the exact location where Judge Keedy had talked about her connection with the litigant on the other side. Meyer thought the recording and the transcript of the hearing had been altered intentionally. On the basis of Meyer's pleadings, the Office of Disciplinary Counsel filed charges, including an allegation that she had violated Rule 8.28 of the Model Rules, which states, "A lawyer shall not make a statement that the lawyer knows to be false or with reckless disregard as to its truth, or falsity concerning the qualifications or integrity of a judge, the judicatory officer or public legal officer, or of a candidate for election or appointment to judicial or legal office." The rule echoes the standard in libel law articulated by the U.S. Supreme Court in New York Times Company v. Sullivan, decided in 1964. In that decision, the court held that public officials who sue for defamation must show that a defendant made false statements with actual malice, knowing the statement was false or acting in reckless disregard of its truth or falsity. Meyer contended that her statements were protected by the First Amendment. The Louisiana Supreme Court, however, determined that Meyer knew or should have known the statements were false. In its opinion in re Meyer, decided in February, the court concluded that objective evidence establishes respondent Meyer either knew her statements were false or made them with reckless disregard for the truth. The state Supreme Court further found that no evidentiary support existed for the allegation that Judge Keedy added statements to the record that were not originally made at the hearing. The court found even more disturbing the statements Meyer made that the appeals court was covering up Keedy's actions. The court ordered Meyer's license to practice suspended for 1 year and 1 day with 6 months deferred and 2 years of probation. That order also took into account Meyer's alleged misconduct in a bankruptcy case. Don't blame the messenger, but 2 of the state Supreme Court's 7 justices wrote notable dissenting opinions. Justice John L. Weimer cautioned that the court should not create an environment in which an attorney, who is duty-bound to report concern about our judicial system, will become too timid in lodging a concern due to fear of being disciplined. Weimer wrote that a reasonable person could justifiably disbelieve that the court's recording equipment went haywire at the exact moment of Judge Keady's purported disclosure. Weimer agreed that Meyer's statements were unprofessional, but he said the court should not subject her to professional discipline. He cited U.S. Supreme Court Justice Hugo L. Black's famous statement in Bridges v. California, the 1941 decision, "For it is a prized American privilege to speak one's mind, although not always with perfect good taste, on all public institutions." Louisiana Justice Jefferson D. Hughes II also dissented from the majority opinion in re Meyer. Alteration of the transcript of a recorded judicial proceeding is a serious, perhaps criminal, matter, he wrote. This court does justice no favor by punishing the whistleblower. The case raises a key question about the extent to which attorney speech, especially when it involves criticism of a judge or the judiciary in general, should be protected under Model Rule 8.28 and its state progeny. The Louisiana Supreme Court applied the so-called objective reasonableness standard, contends Dane S. Cirilino, who represented Meyer before the High Court, when it should have incorporated a subjective standard to focus on whether the attorney knew the statements were false. The Louisiana Supreme Court and other courts have suggested that Rule 8.28 permits a lawyer to be disciplined for merely negligent statements under an objective knew or should have known standard, says Cirilino, a law professor at Loyola University in New Orleans, where he teaches professional responsibility. That is not what the plain language of Rule 8.28 says, nor is it consistent with the standard of Times v. Sullivan. The overarching problem in this case is that the court ignored the plain language of Rule 8.28, which premises discipline on making a statement about a judge knowing it to be false or at least making it with reckless disregard of the truth. Mere negligence should not be enough. Discipline goes too far. Cirilino also maintains that a factual basis for Meyer's statements existed. The tape was altered in a way that suggested some possible malfeasance by the judge's court reporter, Cirilino says. There was a factual basis for Ms. Meyer's claims of corruption. Constitutional law expert Erwin Chemerinsky agrees that the Louisiana Supreme Court's Meyer decision raises serious concerns. It is always troubling when a lawyer is disciplined for criticizing the judge or a court, says Chemerinsky, the dean at the University of California at Irvine School of Law. Rule 8.28 is adopting the New York Times v. Sullivan standard, which requires that the statement be false, and that the speaker knew the statement was false or acted with reckless disregard of the truth. The Supreme Court has said that this requires a subjective awareness of probable falsity. This is not the standard followed by the Louisiana Supreme Court. Meyer petitioned for a rehearing of the court's February decision, which the court denied in May. Justice Weimer said he would have granted review and wrote an opinion that explained his views. The original opinion in this matter has created a dilemma that can only be resolved by having an attorney surrender constitutionally protected rights to free speech and compromise the client's representation. The Louisiana Supreme Court's decision stands for the principle that lawyers have a reduced level of free speech rights, Cirilino says. The Constitution should apply to lawyers just as much as non-lawyers. Ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court will have to resolve whether courts can diverge from the Times v. Sullivan standard and the plain language of Rule 8.28. to discipline a lawyer for a merely negligent misstatement about a judge. This article originally appeared in the December 2016 issue of the Aber Journal with this headline, "Watch What You Say. Disciplinary ruling against attorney raises questions about how far critics of judges can go under ethics rules."
I've read bits and pieces of this, and what becomes clear, and I'm sure this is why he posted it on Twitter, is that people have far too much respect for these judges and these courts, Supreme Courts, state Supreme Courts, etc., and nobody's questioning what they're doing, right? And of course, you know, people like you and me, and I covered this once before, we don't have time for this shit. We don't have time to study to become lawyers like Andy did, and take our moral, you know, our morals and apply them to what is obviously a really corrupt system. I mean, the more I read, the more I realize that these people are all protecting each other, and even in their dissenting opinions, they don't talk about the fact that the people who were crushed by these judges were right, you know. So they all they do is they dissent in some way. They say, well, oh, you don't want to create a atmosphere where whistleblowers feel like they can't blow the whistle. What's that got to do with the fact that this poor, in this case, this poor girl who was defending her client and didn't feel like she should have to recuse herself just because she had some prior relationship with the client? I mean, you don't have to recuse yourself unless it somehow interferes with you defending the client. If anything, having a close relationship with the client may make it so that you, I mean, you're the lawyer, you're supposed to be on their side. And so, you know, they just, and what happens is these people, they're human, as Andy pointed out in one thing, they're not, I mean, maybe some of them are great, some of them aren't, but they're human. And what they do, what happens is these people get into fights, they get into arguments, and they get bad blood between them, they get angry, they get bent out of shape, and then they proceed to double down, triple down, quadruple down, okay? And that's what they did to Andy. You know, going in and dragging him out of his house was just double, quadrupling down. I mean, that's all that they're doing. They're like, we'll show you that there's no lengths that we won't go to get you out of, get this thorn out of our side. And they're just, I think they're just power crazy, right? Okay, so I think we need to start a legal fund for this guy, and we need to get him a lawyer. I don't think he's got anybody representing him. I keep on trying to contact all the people who I see in old articles have very close relationships with him, other lawyers who were close to him, and I can't get a hold of any of them. They've all been disbarred or whatever, and it's like they're all blacked out. Just everybody who ever had anything to do with this guy. And so they're all being attacked. And, you know, I don't know what the situation is with all these guys, but I do know that this guy needs a lawyer, and we need somebody to talk to. I mean, if he had a lawyer, we could talk to his lawyer, who could talk to him, right? But we need to do something pretty quick. It's been nearly 10 days now. You know, for all I know, he's dead by now. I mean, he wouldn't be the first person like this who ended up hanging himself in a cell or stabbed by another prisoner or something weird. It's not brain surgery here. I mean, it's not hard to figure out what they're trying to do to him, and how far. What is hard to figure out is how far they're willing to go, and we need to make sure that they understand that there's somebody looking out for this guy, and not to mention all of us out here trying to look out for him. They've made it impossible for us to look out for him. Okay, so I think it's pretty clear now that they're at least trying to disappear him on the internet, and that they've disappeared him physically. This is called Twigs Cafe Radio, and it's up there bigger than shit. Justice Served with Andy Ostrowski. Andy Ostrowski devotes his show Justice Served to improving the quality and equality of access to justice in America by shining a light on problems that have compromised our system of justice. Our justice system is broken, and the government is not operating according to the founding principles of the consent of the governed. It is running according to the will of the 1%, those who can pay for access. So they don't like his message. I think that's pretty obvious. Here's what happens when you click on listen live, which I assume that it would still give you the let's see about this. If I click on this, Twigs Cafe, Buffalo Media, Truth Seekers. That's something else. So whatever show he had has been disappeared as well. I'm sure they didn't put a post up here that just played live and didn't, I mean, there's got to be a recording somewhere, right? Now, I reported this yesterday, this WB Truth, or today, I forget. I think yesterday. And, it just occurred to me, who puts up a web page fishing for shit on somebody? I mean, that's what this is. This is a web page that this chick has put up, this chick lawyer, probably her, I don't know. Saying that he's a piece of shit, basically, in no uncertain terms, and then asking people to call her with anything and everything that they can about this guy, hoping to find something nasty and maybe get people to lie about him. I mean, who knows, maybe she's offering money. She talks about him, and she seems to be this guy.
Do you think New York State should recognize gay marriage?
No.
No. Okay.
I believe that marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman.
I have not supported same-sex marriage. I've supported civil partnerships and contractual relationships.
I support marriage for lesbian and gay couples. I support it personally and as a matter of policy and law.
So you're saying your opinion on gay marriage changed, or you changed your mind?
I have to say, I think you are being very persistent, but you are playing with my words and playing with what is such an
I'm just trying to clarify
issue.
So I can understand.
No, I don't think you are trying to clarify. I think you're trying to say that, I used to be opposed and now I'm in favor and I did it for political reasons, and that's just flat wrong. So let me just state what I feel like you are implying and repudiate it. I have a strong record. I have a great commitment to this issue, and I am proud of what I've done and the progress we're making.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify what I was saying. No, I was saying that you maybe really believe this all along, but, believe in gay marriage all along, but felt for political reasons America wasn't ready yet and you couldn't say it. That's what I was thinking.
No, that is not true.
It really is great how long you've supported gay marriage.
Yes.
I could have supported it sooner. Well, you did it pretty soon. Could have been sooner. Fair point.
Okay, so even when I officially stopped my MCO, they're officially not going to stop it until 10/31/17. I've canceled my Medicaid because I'm not allowed to have Medicaid unless I'm on an MCO, and there's scumbag middlemen who deny me things that I need, even though my doctor puts in prescriptions and stuff, like for anything over the counter. They deny me, and basically you're not presented with how much they're charging your Medicaid. And I want to just make something perfectly clear. For people like me who have no money, or very little, they say I get this for free. I've had 3 people today tell me, well, if you want to get it for free. Well, I worked all my life. From the time I was born, I was an American. I was part of a community wherever I was in the United States, which is part of the larger community, which is American citizens, all my life. And now I'm getting old and I want to retire. I want to have some time in my life where I don't have to work all the time, especially like I worked, which was like from dawn till dusk, 6 days a week for 13 years, and then another 9 years where I didn't quite have to work so hard because I had my own business. And that's how it works in this country. If you're part of the system and a member of the club. Anyway, so I'm fed up. This marketplace stuff, this for-profit system that they insert between us, these middlemen that they insert between us. I don't have the proof, but I'm very intuitive, and I can tell you that it's there for one reason, and that is to siphon off our Medicaid dollars.
Trump wants to cut $800 billion from Medicaid. Where does all the program's money go? By Megan Thiel King at Megaphone, May 22, 2017. Total spending on Medicaid by state, with darker shades indicating the states that spend the most. President Trump released his new budget proposal Tuesday, and it includes a $610 billion cut over 10 years to the Medicaid budget. That proposal is in addition to the $839 billion cut written into the American Health Care Act, should the bill become law. It was passed by the House earlier this month. That's far from a sure thing, given big questions about the Senate's plans for healthcare reform. But if Medicaid is going to be slashed, it's worth taking a look at exactly how the program spends its money now. After all, Medicaid accounts for $1 out of every $6 spent on healthcare in the U.S. But there are major differences in what net spending looks like on a state-by-state level. And certain services cost Medicaid far more than others. Here's a breakdown based on fiscal 2016 spending, in order of most to least expensive service. Managed care plans as a share of spending. Nothing costs Medicaid more than managed care and health plans. Costs here account for nearly 46% of program spending. This covers health insurance run through managed care organizations, which set up contracts with area healthcare providers to provide care for members at a discounted rate. Those organizations accept a set monthly fee from Medicaid for each member. The states spending the most on managed care and health plans: California, New York, and Texas, the first, fourth, and second most populous states, respectively. Florida, the third most populous state, accounts for the fifth highest level of spending in this category. Acute care for everyone on Medicaid and go for a doctor's appointment or an X-ray. Need prescription drugs or dental work? All that counts as acute care spending in Medicaid's budget, and it makes up the second biggest line item in the program's spending. Medicaid shelled out more than $145 billion in 2016, or about 26% of its entire budget, for acute care for enrollees. The top spenders by state: Vermont, Alaska, and Oklahoma. As the Kaiser Family Foundation notes, some of Vermont's long-term care spending is actually reported as acute care, which affects the rankings. Long-term care for the elderly and disabled. About 20% of Medicaid spending goes toward covering long-term care such as nursing homes. Most private health insurance doesn't cover long-term care, meaning the elderly and disabled often have to pay out of pocket or rely on federal programs such as Medicaid to afford those services. Long-term care payments cover nursing homes, care facilities for individuals with intellectual disabilities, and home health care, among other services. Help for hospitals that treat a high proportion of low-income patients. The federal government helps some hospitals cover the costs of treating the disproportionately high number of low-income individuals who are either on Medicaid or are uninsured. It's what's known as a disproportionate share hospital payment, or DSH payment. Payments here make up a relatively small amount of federal Medicaid spending, just over 3%. That said, spending on DHS payments varies widely by state. They account for nearly 15% of Medicaid spending in Louisiana, the state with the highest rate of Medicaid spending on safety net hospitals. Individuals who can't pay Medicare premiums. Some individuals are eligible for both Medicaid and Medicare, the federal health insurance program for people age 65 and older. Those individuals might not be making enough money to cover their premiums, deductibles, and other insurance costs. About 3% of Medicaid spending goes toward paying premiums for Medicare enrollees
into their pockets. I'm sure they just suck on that all day long. I'm sure that they just have a massive conduit of cash into their owners' pockets. So, what they've done is the for-profit, what you're talking about, Anthem, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, in our case it used to be Coventry, and then it was Passport, which the Attorney General here caught the 3 people running Passport spending all kinds of money on all kinds of stuff for themselves personally and fired them while they should be sitting in jail.
Office of the Attorney General Jack Conway announces $26.4 million settlement with hospital and physician partners of Passport. Press release date: Thursday, July 21, 2011. Contact information: Shirley Catherine Johnson, Deputy Communications Director, Area Code 502-696-5659. Office Attorney General Jack Conway today announced a $26.4 million civil settlement with the physician and hospital partners of the Passport Health Plan. The partners must begin repayment within 10 days of this announcement. The final payments will take place on or before January 1, 2016. In these difficult economic times, when the Commonwealth is forced to cut services and count every penny, the Passport Board of Directors acted recklessly and irresponsibly, said General Conway. Kentucky taxpayers are now getting a return of their money budgeted by the state to provide health care for fellow Kentuckians most in need. By the terms of this settlement, for investor member managers of Passport will each repay multi-million-dollar settlement amounts back to Passport as restitution for improper and illegal cash transfers received by each of these entities from Passport in 2008, 2009 and 2010. The money will be used by Passport to pay for Medicaid patient care. Passport is the vendor that operates the managed care contract to provide healthcare services for Medicaid patients in the greater Louisville area. This is taxpayer money that should have been applied to healthcare costs, and with this action, those dollars will be returned for that purpose, said Governor Steve Beshear. I'm pleased that our administration was able to work with the Attorney General's office to recover this money while at the same time continuing to protect health care for our most vulnerable families. The Attorney General initiated an investigation into the management of Passport and the transfers of money from the entity to the physician and hospital partners in response to Auditor Critlerland's November 2010 audit of Passport. General Conway's investigation focused on 3 distributions, totaling $30.5 million, from Passport into the bank accounts of its investor members. These transfers were authorized in December 2008 and December 2009 by the Passport Board of Directors, which was comprised almost entirely of representatives of the investor members. At the same time, the Passport Board approved the distribution of $30.5 million. Passport leadership was in Frankfort requesting a rate increase from the state. The Attorney General believed the investor members transferred the money because they knew Passport would not be granted a rate increase if this $30.5 million was accounted for on its books. The Attorney General also believes that these transactions were illegal under Kentucky state law. By statute, nonprofit corporations cannot pay a dividend or any part of the income of a corporation to its members. These transfers violated Passport's own corporate bylaws which, if properly adhered to, would have prevented the enrichment of any director or incorporator. Under the terms of the settlement announced today, each of the entities will be required to repay the following to Passport: University Physicians Associates UPA $14.383 million. Approximately $7.2 million will be repaid within 10 days, and the remainder will be paid out in 4 equal payments through July 31, 2015. Norton Hospital, $4 million in one lump sum payment. Jewish and St. Mary's Incorporated, $4 million repaid in 3 equal payments beginning on July 31, 2011. University Medical Center UMC $4 million over 5 years, with its first payment on December 31, 2011. The settlement does not require repayment of $2.61 million from one of the investor members, Louisville/Jefferson Primary Care Associates. The Attorney General determined that the entity used the money to provide health care to its target group of patients. In addition, primary care associates would not be financially able to pay back the money it received, and forcing it to do so would negatively impact services to the community's most needy residents. UPA, who reached out to the Attorney General's office to cooperate in the investigation, is also receiving the $1.5 million credit in this settlement that will be counted as a portion of the costs of an upgrade to UPA's electronic medical records system attributable to Medicaid patients. The new system will create a care delivery system on PAR with some of the best in the nation. The investor members settling today are receiving the civil release of all claims relating to the covered conduct, which is defined in the agreement. This means the Attorney General considers its civil investigation of Passport, with respect to this conduct, closed. America Health Mercy today's Passport settlement is in addition to the January settlement with America Health Mercy Health Plan AMHP, the third-party administrator for the Passport. It agreed to pay $2 million in damages to the Kentucky Medicaid program. The consent judgment constitutes treble damages, or triple the amount of the actual damages, for the Kentucky Medicaid program. In addition to the damages, the agreement required that AMHP put procedures and personnel in place to ensure that all reports it submits are accurate. The consent judgment was a result of a 9-month investigation by the Attorney General's Office of Medicaid Fraud and Abuse Control. Since Attorney General Conway took office in January 2008, his Office of Medicaid Fraud and Abuse Control has recovered or been awarded more than $175 million for the state and federal Medicaid programs. Company to pay $2 million for falsifying Kentucky Medicaid records by Beth Musgrave. B. Musgrave at heraldleader.com, January 27, 2011, 12:00 a.m. Frankfort. The company that administers Medicaid for the troubled Passport health plan has agreed to pay more than $2 million in damages for falsifying medical data to get a bonus payment from the state. In 2009, Attorney General Jack Conway said Wednesday at a news conference that his office was contacted by a whistleblower at America Health Mercy 9 months ago. The employee said the company was falsifying reports that said certain women received hysterectomies or pap smears. America Health Mercy is the third-party administrator for Passport, which manages health care for the poor and disabled in Jefferson and 15 other counties. Passport Health Plan, in a written statement, said Wednesday it is considering changing its third-party administrator for some services. Passport also has been the subject of a recent state audit that found questionable spending on lobbyists, travel and expenses, and multiple conflicts of interest between Passport and America Health Mercy. The Attorney General's investigation found that America Health Mercy had altered some data, upping its score for cervical cancer screenings in 2009. That higher score allowed the company to receive $677,000 in bonus money. As part of its agreement with the Attorney General's office, America Health Mercy will pay the state $2 million, or triple the $677,000 it received in bonus money. The money will be split between the federal and state governments, both of which fund the program. The federal government typically pays 70% to 80% of the cost, with the state paying the remainder. America Health Mercy, in a written statement, said the people who were involved in altering medical data no longer work for the company. America Health Mercy, which is based in Philadelphia, did not admit any wrongdoing. Our agreement to a settlement, as the consent judgment states, does not in any way constitute an admission of wrongdoing, and America Health Mercy denies any intent to misrepresent data. The company said, "We enter into this settlement in order to expeditiously resolve this dispute and to avoid the delay, expense and inconvenience of protracted litigation." Conway said his office initially opened the criminal investigation but ultimately decided the criminal conviction might be difficult to obtain. "There was knowledge that these scores were erroneous," he said. But AmeriHealth Mercy and Passport worked with the Attorney Generals of Medicaid Fraud and Abuse Control Division to resolve questions about the bonus agreement, Conway said. Passport's administration appeared not to know about the false information, Conway said. Mark Carter, interim CEO of Passport Health Plan, said it is considering changing its third-party administrator for certain administrative services. Carter said Passport Health Plan had audited the results of some of AmeriHealth Mercy's data, but the erroneous data about pap smears and hysterectomies did not show up in the findings, he said. "We had previously advised AmeriHealth Mercy health plans of our plan to pursue a new approach to plant management, which would include issuing a request for proposal for certain administrative functions," Carter said. He said Passport might take further actions if requested by the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, which oversees the Passport contract. Conway also said Wednesday his office is looking into other alleged improprieties involving Medicaid payments and Passport. One area under investigation is whether more than $30 million in transfer payments between Passport and its initial investors was an appropriate use of Medicaid money. Senator Tim Shaughnessy, de Louisville, has raised questions about whether Passport should have transferred the money to 5 Louisville area healthcare providers that were founding members of Passport. According to the audit, there were questions about whether $20 million of that money was used for indigent care, as it was intended, and whether the 5 healthcare organizations ever should have received the money. "We are looking at that for potential legal action," Conway said of the transfer payments. Since the November audit, Passport has fired 2 of its executives and hired an interim chief executive. It also announced this week that it was hiring an internal compliance officer, the move that will help Passport monitor AmeriHealth Mercy's contract, Conway said. Passport is the state's only managed healthcare program for Medicaid. Governor Steve Beshear announced last year that he intends to move other parts of the state to similar managed healthcare plans to stem ballooning costs in the healthcare program for the poor and disabled.
I don't think they put them in jail. So all this shit, right? All this crap. I mean, I could go on if I wanted to and set up a number of things I could show you as to how corrupt and how, I mean, it's harder to prove that the whole system is corrupt. And like you get these guys like I've been talking about for this couple of days, and today I'm talking about him, this lawyer who is indicting the system. You know, well, the system for taking our taxes, which I've given, I don't know how much money in taxes over my life, but I know that they took, you know, like if I made $40,000 in a year, they'd take 12,000 of it, or 13,000 of it at least, and that's probably everything, right? State and local and of course federal. So they have their ways of siphoning up our money, and we hope, and we're crazy to believe that they actually use it and use it wisely. But at the same time, the for-profit people have all set it up so that they can just suck it all off. And I mean, we talk about having to pay like percentage banks and stuff because the money is borrowed already, right? But that's nothing compared to the system that we're not allowed to investigate. I mean, even if we had time and the resources, they don't let us look into the system and where the money's going, and if they do, they make sure that it's not done in a way that in any way impedes the flow to the top. Because I know, yes, I'm not I don't have the resources and everything, but I know, I can just feel it. I mean, and it goes along, it's not just feelings. I mean, I study a lot, but we're not given the information, and or we're not helped. I mean, there's nobody put up to it. Like, we don't have government agencies where people sit around and study this stuff and then make it available to people like us who don't have all day and don't have, and by myself I don't think I could do it, even if I had the resources and the data and the ability to talk to all the people who are involved. First of all, they're not going to want to tell you anything. They'll even put people in between you and them who don't know anything. Like just now I got off the phone with Kentucky Medicaid. So I have canceled. All I've canceled is my MCO, but they refuse to allow me to have Medicaid, which I feel entitled to. So now I'm going to be going to I guess emergency rooms, because I mean there's no doctor that's going to take me without health care and without coverage of any kind, and I don't have Medicaid anymore, and so that's it. For all the asses out there who tell me that I'm not willing to, I just take, and I'm not willing to suffer for what I believe in, well, there you go. And I'm sick. I'm sick with the same kind of things that you're all sick with. I was talking to my doctor this morning. I'll put my conversation with her on here, and talking to her about, and I said this to her. I said, well, needed. I assure you, I'm no threat to your information here. Well, I was going to tell you it's Courtney Schneider, and I've already told her. Okay. But this thing with my throat and has been going on for 55 years now. Right. And I have this real concern that it seems like nobody's taking it seriously. Right.
You can be a chronic strep carrier, and it's one of those things that no matter how much antibiotics we give you, that you'll be a chronic carrier, that you'll never make it completely go away.
Like I said to her, we can send a man to the moon, right, but we can't seem to find the money and the time to go after something this is not just me. This is like, right, I would say 100% of the population has got strep.
Right, they do, and that's why you're a chronic carrier of it. So the antibiotics, you can keep taking antibiotics, but it will come back. And if you take so much antibiotics, you're going to start to develop resistance to other bacteria too.
Right, which means that they need a massive program to come up with other solutions. Right. Whether it's science fiction type things or whatever.
The drug companies are always trying to come up with new drugs.
No, they're not. I've watched a show just the other day that talks about how they refuse to spend money on research into new antibiotics, even though antibiotics may not be the actual solution. But they refuse to put money into it, period. Yeah. Because it's not economical to them.
I don't know. They make a lot of money off their antibiotics.
Right. They make a lot of antibiotics off of what they do, but they don't even attempt to come up with a solution. Yeah. I mean, to me, if I was the head of something like that, I would say, well, we're going to have to eradicate these bacteria everywhere. Right. I'm not in charge of such a thing, but if I was, I would come up with some.
It would be nice if they could.
Well,
I agree.
It's not for lack of being able to; it's for lack of will.
Yeah.
So, at that point, the people who are all sick with this have to get involved, and they have to come down. So we are doing that. You know, I mean, we're all busy with all kinds of other political problems, but we're definitely going to get around to that.
Yeah. All right.
Which is the way out. Probably 100% of the population has, well, I'll let you listen to the conversation, but I said has streptococcus, but I'm talking about not just streptococcus, but a variety of bugs right inside of us causing problems. And I said this is, and it kills you slowly, you know. So this is a national epidemic. I mean, we're talking 100% of the people have it. It causes arthritis, it causes cavities. Imagine if the poop that comes out of streptococcus and other whatever else is in there can eat right through the enamel of your teeth, okay? Because that's what it is. It's what they poop out. It's an acid, and obviously that's extremely toxic. And it can eat right through your teeth. That's how you get to, that's why I'm missing half of my teeth. And so that gets into your system, and it creates an environment that is so toxic to your body that your body decides the only thing it can do to try and stay alive is to start the cells in your body, wherever the toxics accumulate, decides that it has to rapidly reproduce the cells that are being poisoned. It triggers. See, this is what doctors and what the establishment will never tell you. There is no such thing as cancer. What it is, and it's certainly not caused by radiation or by chromosomal damage from this or that or the other thing. I mean, yeah, maybe from time to time. But what it's really caused by, and why people are all getting bladder cancer, kidney cancer, you know, all these kind of cancers, and then spreading all throughout the body. What it is the cells react to their toxic environment by just like people in different places where they're all dying, say of hunger or of whatever, and so they have 18 kids because it's just a biological reaction. It's a way of surviving. So maybe out of 18 kids, even though there's no food, one of them will make it, right? To have some other 18 kids. Okay. Well, the cells in your body are doing the same thing. They're surrounded by such toxins, and they just decide, well, we'll just reproduce massively, and they're not aware of the fact that they're part of a body, and that the body can't support some cells in the body just massively reproducing. I mean, that's just part of it. But that's what all the cancer that we're seeing is all about. Okay, as usual, I get way off the subject, but the subject is health. And these are important things that you need to know. So you do need to know, and I just care about other people's health too, so I'm telling you this, so you need to get the toxins out of your body. We need to come up with a, you know, what I told her was you can put a man on the moon, but you can't come up with a project like that, with that kind of funding and that kind of, what am I saying here, strength or, you know, funding and experts and working hard and smart to overcome this epidemic. You know, I mean, it's just, it's bad. I mean, there's no sense of priorities here. The reason you wake up with a headache and a neck ache every day is because of all these bacteria in your body that are, and they say there are beneficial bacteria, but that's kind of, and it may or may not be true, but it's a way of kind of getting people's to kind of accept the fact that they're not really doing anything about the bacteria. So, well, there's good bacteria and bad bacteria. No, good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. All these things are just really excuses for, we want to take your money, but we don't really want to be serious about anything that is serious, like the bacterial infection and the fungus and all the stuff that's infesting us. They just don't, I mean, as far as I can understand, it's all part of the human condition, but you know, we have all kinds of time to help so-and-so's daughter become a dancer, or this person to do that, but we don't have time to and money and effort to put into a epidemic that, yeah, it's not like Ebola. You don't just start bleeding out your eyes in 24 hours, but over your whole life this thing just kills you. I mean, it really does. Eventually it does kill you. And it might be, if we could solve this one problem, people would live 200 or 300 years. They say that people did. Maybe it was before all this infestation that we're suffering from. So, you know, I want somebody to take what I'm saying seriously. It's for all of our goods, okay? You know, as I was checking into emergency this morning, because I have this problem, and I think it's related to all this, and the girl at the desk coughed into her hand and said, well, let me clean my hand off. I don't want to, you know, pass something on to you. And she was talking about the Kentucky crud, and that's something I've heard, along with Kentucky crotch rot. That's another one I've heard. I mean, these are all infestations of some kind that, if not most, all of the people, and it's not just Kentucky, it's all over the world, people are all suffering. And some people, I think, are either luckier or better at avoiding it and avoiding the symptoms, and because I think these symptoms just slowly dog you until you die. Okay, so as I have canceled my Obamacare, I want to talk today and show you why I've done it, okay? And it's because in Kentucky, they put these private companies in between you and your Medicaid. And those private companies, they do a lot of things to screw people. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it isn't the whole medical establishment that's a problem. If you've heard what I had to say to the doctor today about, you know, how they do things and how they don't do things, you'll see, you know, a lot of reasons why I'm fed up. I'm fed up with the whole system. I mean, I'm fed up with the way they don't really take seriously a lot of things that cause long-term health problems. And I'll probably talk more about that, but right now I just want to show you how I found out that my MCO, managed care organization, called Passport, was just, I mean, they're just out of control. As a matter of fact, doctors and everybody, they're all out of control. I mean, they're just rampaging down this one train track, you know, head on. All they care about is that, and it's like it's designed to give them a paycheck, a decent paycheck every month, while the rest of us don't matter, you know. Our paychecks don't matter, but they've got it all figured out. And so I'm just going to point out with a few articles like this one that says a reminder of what happens when you privatize public services, okay? Because I can't say it as well as these people do.
Sunday, May 22, 2011, a reminder of what happens when you privatize public services. Kentucky's a long way from Rick Scott's "Everything's Got to Go. No offer too low" fire sale of Florida state government, but its attempt to save money on Medicare by letting a private contractor handle it offers more proof that privatizing government always fails. Tom Loftus at the Courier-Journal, as the state auditor's office zeroed in on what it described as extravagant spending by Passport Health Plan officials last August. The organization's two top administrators were still running up the tab, attending the convention of conservative state legislators at a luxury resort on the San Diego waterfront. The cost of the trip for Shannon Turner, who was then Passport's executive vice president, and Nancy Gaines, an associate vice president, exceeded $6,300, according to documents released to the Courier-Journal under the Kentucky Open Records Act. State Auditor Crit Lorland's scathing report last November criticized Passport, which delivers Medicaid services to about 165,000 residents in the Louisville area, for lavish spending on such things as travel, meals and gifts during the 2007-09 period. The report said such spending had an uncertain benefit to Passport. Yet the documents obtained by the newspaper, after a court ruling that Passport must comply with the State Open Records Act, show that such spending continued in 2010, right up to the release of the auditor's report in November. In all, Passport's spending on travel, meals and other entertainment totaled $27,728 in the first 11 months of 2010, according to the records. Here's the thing about public services run by public servants: then they fuck up. You figure out who is the closest elected official to those public employees, and you run her out of office. When those public services are contracted out to a private company, however, that separates the service from the elected official, and makes her far less vulnerable to the wrath of voters unhappy with poor service. Who is more responsive to your complaining calls, the county road department or ADT? You really think a call center in Bangalore gives a shit about the snow blocking your driveway? Posted by Yellow Dog at 11:00 a.m.
Okay, this is about Fed allege $900 million in fake medical bills, kickbacks, and other health care fraud. The Justice Department, well, you can listen to it. Listen to it yourself.
Feds allege $900 million in fake medical bills, kickbacks, and other healthcare fraud by Carolyn White Johnson and Matt Zapotowski. June 22, 2016. The Justice Department announced Wednesday it had charged a record 301 people with schemes that defrauded government health programs by submitting $900 million in fraudulent health claims. The announcement of the charges, called the largest takedown for Medicare and Medicaid fraud in history, was the result of a nationwide sweep that exposed alleged kickbacks, embezzlement and fake claims to the government programs that provide health care for the elderly and the poor. The allegations involved various kinds of fraud in diverse areas of health care, ranging from prescription drugs to home health care to physical therapy. They submitted dishonest claims, they charged excessive fees, and they prescribed unnecessary drugs, Attorney General Loretta Lynch said at a news conference. As this takedown should make clear, healthcare fraud is not an abstract violation. It's not a benign offense. It's a serious crime. Economy and Business alerts breaking news about economic and business issues. Sign up. The Justice Department called the sweep unprecedented in a press release. Last year, 243 people were charged with $712 million in false claims. Among the alleged fraud uncovered, the Texas doctors certified patients for home health care that was not necessary. Then home health care companies billed Medicare for $23.3 million based on those certifications. A California physician who performed unnecessary vein ablation procedures was charged with $12 million in fraudulent billing. In Florida, the owner of clinics that delivering fusion drugs was accused of submitting reimbursement claims for expensive drugs that were never purchased or given to patients. In Michigan, owners of 2 physical therapy clinics were accused of submitting claims to Medicare after patients had died and fabricating imaging reports to build a false medical case for prescribing painkillers and physical therapy visits. More than 60 people were charged with fraud related to the prescription drug benefit portion of Medicare. The Medicare Fraud Strike Force began its work in 2007 and has charged more than 2,900 people with healthcare fraud, who have billed Medicare for $8.9 billion.
The amount of money being diverted out of healthcare in this country and into the pockets of criminals, and they say they only catch 10%, and it's about $1 billion a year. So that would be $10 billion a year. $10 billion a year.
Justice News Attorney General Loretta E. Lynch delivers remarks at press conference announcing the National Healthcare Fraud Takedown. Washington, D.C. Wednesday, June 22, 2016. Remarks as prepared for delivery. Good morning everyone, and thank you all for being here. I am joined by several key leaders in our nation's efforts to address healthcare fraud. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Sylvia Burwell, Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division Leslie Caldwell, United States Attorney Wilfred Duth of the Southern District of Florida, FBI Associate Deputy Director David Bowditch, HHS Deputy Inspector General for Investigations Garrett Cantrell, DCIS Acting Director Dermot O'Reilly, and Shantanu Agrawal, Deputy Administrator and Director of the Center for Program Integrity and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We are here today to announce the significant step in the federal government's ongoing work to keep our nation's healthcare system free of fraud and exploitation and to ensure that taxpayer dollars are used lawfully and appropriately. Over the last 3 days, the Medicare Fraud Strike Force, a joint effort between the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services, executed a significant nationwide healthcare fraud takedown. This action involved charging or unveiling charges against approximately 300 defendants in 36 federal districts for their alleged participation in a variety of schemes involving more than $900 million in fraudulent billings, making this the largest takedown in the strike force's 9-year history. The defendants named in these charges include doctors, nurses, pharmacists, physical therapists and home healthcare providers. They are accused of a wide range of serious crimes, from conspiring to commit healthcare fraud to making false statements and from bribery to money laundering. They submitted dishonest claims, charged excessive fees and prescribed unnecessary drugs. One group of defendants controlled a network of clinics in Brooklyn that they filled with patients through bribes and kickbacks. These patients then received medically unnecessary treatment, for which the clinic received over $38 million from Medicare and Medicaid, money that the conspirators subsequently laundered through more than 15 shell companies. In another case, a Detroit clinic billed Medicare for more than $36 million, even though it was actually the front for a narcotics diversion scheme. And yet another defendant took advantage of his position in a state agency in Georgia by accepting bribes and recommending the approval of unqualified health providers. These are just a few examples of the criminals that we targeted in this operation, and although the specific nature of their wrongdoing varied from case to case, all of them betrayed the basic principles of their professions. In addition to the usual patterns of fraud and deception that we've encountered in the past, we also saw new trends emerging in this year's charges. For instance, in a number of cases involving the Medicare prescription drug benefit program known as Part D, we saw new evidence of identity theft, including the use of stolen doctors' IDs to prepare fake prescriptions. We have also seen a growing number of cases involving compounded medications, which are combinations of two or more drugs prepared by a licensed professional. In recent years, the cost of these drugs has grown exponentially, making them a more attractive target for criminals looking to exploit them for profit. As this takedown should make clear, healthcare fraud is not an abstract violation or benign offense. It is a serious crime. The wrongdoers that we pursue in these operations seek to use public funds for private enrichment. They target real people, many of them in need of significant medical care. They promise effective cures and therapies, but they provide none. Above all, they abuse basic bonds of trust between doctor and patient, between pharmacist and doctor, between taxpayer and government, and pervert them to their own ends. The Department of Justice is determined to continue working to ensure that the American people know that their healthcare system works for them, and them alone. In tackling these challenges, the Medicare Fraud Strike Force relies on close cooperation between the federal, state and local governments. Since 2014, the Justice Department's Criminal Division has organized an annual National Healthcare Fraud Training Conference for Assistant U.S. Attorneys and state and federal law enforcement officers, which has substantially expanded the reach of our actions. More than 20 non-strike force U.S. attorneys' offices participated in this year's takedown, helping us to combat healthcare fraud in a total of 30 federal districts nationwide, from Alaska to Florida. We were also assisted by approximately 20 state Medicaid fraud control units, the reflection of the close partnership between state and federal authorities in combating healthcare fraud, a partnership that we will continue to strengthen in the days ahead. I want to thank my colleagues in the FBI, the Criminal Division and U.S. Attorneys' offices for their ongoing efforts to combat healthcare fraud. I want to thank all of the state and local law enforcement officers across the country who participated in this complex and fast-moving takedown. And I look forward to continuing our work together in the days ahead. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to Secretary Burwell, who has been a dedicated leader and indispensable partner in this critical work and who will provide additional details on today's announcement.
That is being diverted, and who knows if that's even the real number, and how much is legally diverted, how much is just through, I mean, they've got it set up so that they run you in and out of the doctors, and then that's all they need to charge, right? And they have this system set up. I mean, it's become evident to me over the years. It takes a while for it to coalesce in your mind, but after a while you realize that they've got this system set up. It's like a puppy mill, you know. They just run you in and out, and they never really do anything for you, and they never really address any serious problems that the whole community in America is facing. Like, why are we all, you know, why by the age of 35 do we all have serious neck pain, different types of allergies and all these kind of things? I mean, we can send a man to the moon, but we can't pay for a project to address some of these, on Star Trek, when a planet has a problem, Dr. McCoy is racing for the cure. He's racing. Jim, I'll have the answer for you by tomorrow, I swear. And all that kind of stuff. Why does our medical establishment just content to let people be sick? Low level sickness. Why are we content with that? And doesn't, in my opinion, it kills us eventually. I really believe that, most people who die of urinary tract cancers and bladder and all these things, all this stuff, and all the stuff I don't know about, but I feel it in my bones. They don't care about any of that stuff. They don't want to cure us. They want to treat us. They just want to be able to fulfill that little bit of paperwork that they need to fulfill in order to get their, the doctors make a lot of money, and even nurses and staff make pretty good money. And then the administrators make a lot of money, and the CEOs and stuff make millions and millions. And then the rich people funnel all kinds of money off of it in different ways, and fraudulently and criminally. By the time we get done, how much do we really get? I paid taxes for 20, 30, well, since I was 16, so let's just say 40 years. I've been working or going to school or whatever. Everything counts, man. As a part of the community, I'm not saying I never had any fun. I refuse to live my life that way, where you just give, work, and maybe I would have been better off in the end. But I would have lost a whole lifetime doing it. There's got to be some kind of middle ground, right? And I believe I found that. I always took my life seriously. I found that it was hard to take your life seriously and take the community and the systems, seriously, because you could see and you could feel the corruption and you could see it was all set up just to funnel money in, right? There we go, United Breast Cancer. It's just like it's non-stop. So anyway, I've canceled mine. So I'll include this so you can learn a little bit about that. And then Department of Justice Attorney General Loretta E. Lynch delivers remarks at press conference announcing a national health care fraud takedown. And this is her speech. It's not too long. I'll include that.
Justice News Department of Justice Office of Public Affairs for immediate release Wednesday, June 22, 2016. National healthcare fraud takedown results in charges against 301 individuals for approximately $900 million in false billing. Most defendants charged and largest alleged loss amount in Strikeforce history. Attorney General Loretta E. Lynch and Department of Health and Human Services HHS Secretary Sylvia Matthews-Burwell announced today an unprecedented nationwide sweep led by the Medicare Fraud Strike Force in 36 federal districts, resulting in criminal and civil charges against 301 individuals, including 61 doctors, nurses and other licensed medical professionals, for their alleged participation in health Medicare fraud schemes involving approximately $900 million in false billings. 23 state Medicaid fraud control units also participated in today's arrests. In addition, the HHS Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services (CMS) is suspending payment to a number of providers using its suspension authority provided in the Affordable Care Act. This coordinated takedown is the largest in history, both in terms of the number of defendants charged and loss amount. Attorney General Lynch and Secretary Burwell were joined in the announcement by Assistant Attorney General Leslie R. Caldwell of the Justice Department's Criminal Division, FBI Associate Deputy Director David Bowditch, Inspector General Daniel Levinson of the HHS Office of Inspector General OIG, Acting Director Dermot O'Reilly of the Defense Criminal Investigative Service DCIS and Deputy Administrator and Director of CMS Center for Program Integrity Shantanu Agrawal MD. The defendants announced today are charged with various healthcare fraud-related crimes, including conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, violations of the anti-kickback statutes, money laundering and aggravated identity theft. The charges are based on a variety of alleged fraud schemes involving various medical treatments and services, including home health care, psychotherapy, physical and occupational therapy, durable medical equipment DME and prescription drugs. More than 60 of the defendants arrested are charged with fraud related to the Medicare prescription drug benefit program known as Part D, which is the fastest-growing component of the Medicare program overall. As this takedown should make clear, healthcare fraud is not an abstract violation or benign offense. It is a serious crime, said Attorney General Lynch. The wrongdoers that we pursue in these operations seek to use public funds for private enrichment. They target real people, many of them in need of significant medical care. They promise effective cures and therapies, but they provide none. Above all, they abuse basic bonds of trust between doctor and patient, between pharmacist and doctor, between taxpayer and government, and pervert them to their own ends. The Department of Justice is determined to continue working to ensure that the American people know that their healthcare system works for them, and them alone. Millions of seniors depend on Medicare for essential health coverage, and our action shows that this administration remains committed to cracking down on individuals who try to defraud the program, said Secretary Burwell. We are continuing to put new tools and additional resources to work, including $350 million from the Affordable Care Act, for healthcare fraud prevention and enforcement efforts. Thanks to the hard work of the Medicare Fraud Strike Force, we are making progress in addressing and deterring fraud and delivering results to help ensure Medicare remains strong for years to come. According to court documents, the defendants allegedly participated in schemes to submit claims to Medicare and Medicaid for treatments that were medically unnecessary and often never provided. In many cases, patient recruiters, Medicare beneficiaries and other co-conspirators were allegedly paid cash kickbacks in return for supplying beneficiary information to providers, so that the providers could then submit fraudulent bills to Medicare for services that were medically unnecessary or never performed. Collectively, the doctors, nurses, licensed medical professionals, healthcare company owners and others charged are accused of submitting a total of approximately $900 million in fraudulent billing. The Medicare Fraud Strike Force is a model of 21st-century data-driven law enforcement, and it has had a remarkable impact on healthcare fraud across the country, said Assistant Attorney General Caldwell. As the cases announced today demonstrate, the strike force's strategic approach keeps us a step ahead of emerging fraud trends, including drug diversion and fraud involving compounded medications and hospice care. These criminals target the most vulnerable in our society by taking money away from the care of the elderly, children and disabled, said Associate Deputy Director Bowditch. The FBI is committed to working with our partners and the public to stop fraud and ensure that healthcare dollars are used to help the sick, and not line the pockets of criminals. While it is impossible to accurately pinpoint the true cost of fraud in federal healthcare programs, fraud is a significant threat to the program's stability and endangers access to healthcare services for millions of Americans, said Inspector General Levinson. As members of the Joint Strike Force, OIG will continue to play a vital role in tracking down these criminals and seeing that justice is done. DCIS, in partnership with our fellow federal investigative agencies, will continue to uncompromisingly investigate and bring to justice the people who perpetrate these criminal acts, said Acting Director O'Reilly. Their actions threaten to cripple our vital national healthcare industry and place our citizenry at risk. We will remain vigilant. Taxpayers and Congress provided CMS with resources to adopt powerful monitoring systems that fight fraud, safeguard program dollars, and protect Medicare and Medicaid, said Deputy Administrator and Center for Program Integrity Director Agrawal. The diligent use of innovative data analytic systems has contributed or led directly to many of the law enforcement cases presented here today. CMS is committed to its collaboration with these agencies to keep federally funded healthcare programs safe and strong for all Americans. The Medicare Fraud Strike Force operations are part of the Healthcare Fraud Prevention and Enforcement Action Team HEAT, a joint initiative announced in May 2009 between the Department of Justice and HHS to focus their efforts to prevent and deter fraud and enforce current anti-fraud laws around the country. The Medicare Fraud Strike Force operates in 9 locations and since its inception in March 2007 has charged over 2,900 defendants who collectively have falsely billed the Medicare program for over $8.9 billion. Including today's enforcement actions, nearly 1,200 individuals have been charged in national takedown operations, which have involved more than $3.4 billion in fraudulent billings. Today's announcement marks the second time that districts outside of strike force locations participated in a national takedown, and they accounted for 82 defendants charged in this takedown. Asterisk 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 for the strike force locations. In the Southern District of Florida, a total of 100 defendants were charged with offenses relating to their participation in various fraud schemes involving approximately $220 million in false billings for home health care, mental health services and pharmacy fraud. In one case, 9 defendants have been charged with operating 6 different Miami-area home health companies for the purpose of submitting false and fraudulent claims to Medicare, including for services that were not medically necessary and that were based on bribes and kickbacks. In total, Medicare paid the 6 companies over $24 million as a result of the scheme. In the Southern District of Texas, 24 individuals were charged in cases involving over $146 million in alleged fraud. One of these defendants is a physician with the highest number of referrals for home health services in the Southern District of Texas. This physician has been charged with participating in separate schemes to bill Medicare for medically unnecessary home health services that were often not provided. Numerous companies that submitted claims to Medicare using the fraudulent home health referrals from the physician were paid over $38 million by Medicare. In the Northern District of Texas, 11 people were charged in cases involving over $47 million in alleged fraud. In one scheme, A physician allowed unlicensed individuals to perform physician services and then billed Medicare as if he performed them. Additionally, the physician certified patients for home health care that was often medically unnecessary. Home health companies submitted approximately $23.3 million in billings to Medicare based on the physician's fraudulent certifications. In the Central District of California, 22 defendants were charged for their roles in schemes to defraud Medicare of approximately $162 million. In one case, a doctor was charged with causing almost $12 million in losses to Medicare through his own fraudulent billing, including performing medically unnecessary vein ablation procedures on Medicare beneficiaries. In the Eastern District of Michigan, 19 defendants face charges for their alleged roles in fraud, kickback, money laundering and drug distribution schemes involving approximately $114 million in false claims for services that were medically unnecessary or never rendered. Among these are owners of a physical therapy clinic who lured patients through the payment of cash kickbacks and medically unnecessary prescriptions for Schedule II medications for the purpose of stealing more than $36 million from Medicare. In Tampa, Orlando and elsewhere in the Middle District of Florida, 15 individuals were charged with participating in a variety of schemes including compounding pharmacy fraud and intravenous prescription drug fraud involving $17 million in fraudulent billing. In one case, the owners of several infusion clinics allegedly defrauded the Medicare program of over $8 million through a scheme involving reimbursement claims for expensive intravenous prescription drugs that were never purchased and never administered to patients. In the Northern District of Illinois, 6 individuals were charged in cases related to 3 different schemes involving bribery and false and fraudulent claims for home health services and disability benefits. The charged defendants include individuals who owned or co-owned the fraudulent providers and a medical doctor. In total, these schemes resulted in over $12 million being paid to the defendants and their companies. In the Eastern District of New York, 10 individuals were charged in 6 different cases, including 5 individuals who were charged for their roles in a scheme involving over $86 million in physical and occupational therapy claims to Medicare and Medicaid. In that case, the defendants are alleged to have filled a network of Brooklyn clinics that they controlled with patients by paying bribes and kickbacks. Once at the clinics, these patients were subjected to medically unnecessary therapy. The defendants then laundered the proceeds of the fraud through over a dozen shell companies. In the Eastern District of Louisiana, 3 defendants were charged in connection with a healthcare fraud and wire fraud conspiracy involving a defunct home healthcare provider. This scheme centered on the payment of kickbacks through patient recruiters in exchange for patients who oftentimes never received nor qualified for home health care as billed. Once admitted, patient medical records were routinely fabricated and altered to support false and fraudulent claims to Medicare. In addition to the strike force, today's enforcement actions include cases brought by 26 U.S. attorneys' offices, including the unsealing of search warrants and investigations being conducted by the Eastern District of North Carolina, Southern District of Georgia, District of Columbia, Eastern District of Texas, Southern District of West Virginia, Middle District of Louisiana, District of Minnesota, and the Northern District of Alabama. In the Northern District of Georgia, 9 defendants were charged for their roles in 2 healthcare fraud schemes involving $7 million in fraudulent billings. 8 defendants were charged in a scheme where bribes and kickbacks were allegedly paid to a state of Georgia official in exchange for falsifying applications and licensing requirements and recommending the approval of unqualified mental health providers. In the Middle District of Alabama, 2 defendants were charged for their roles in a mental health services scheme allegedly involving $246,000 in fraudulent billings. In the Middle District of Tennessee, a doctor was charged for his role in an illegal kickback scheme under which he allegedly referred patients to a certain DME supplier in exchange for cash kickbacks. In the Western District of Kentucky, a business entity was charged for its role in a healthcare fraud scheme. In the Southern District of Ohio, 2 defendants were charged for their roles in a $7.5 million home healthcare fraud scheme. In the Western and Eastern Districts of Pennsylvania, 3 defendants were charged for their roles in drug diversion and embezzlement schemes. In the Southern District of New York, a pharmacist was charged for his role in a scheme involving over $51 million in fraudulent Medicare and Medicaid billings. In the districts of Maine, Alaska, Kansas, Connecticut and Vermont, 5 defendants were charged for their roles in Medicaid-related schemes. In the Eastern District of Missouri, 4 defendants, including a doctor and pharmacist, were charged for their roles in schemes involving over $3 million in billings. In the Southern District of California, 8 individuals were charged in healthcare-related cases. In one case, 5 individuals, including a doctor and a pharmacist, were charged in a scheme to pay bribes and kickbacks to doctors in exchange for prescribing expensive durable medical equipment and compound paint creams that were not medically necessary. The indictment alleges that approximately $27 million in false and fraudulent claims were submitted to insurers. In the District of New Mexico, 2 defendants were charged for their roles in a Medicaid fraud scheme. In the Northern District of Iowa, a settlement agreement was reached with a corporate entity for its role in a healthcare fraud scheme in a juvenile residential treatment facility. In the District of Oregon, 1 defendant was charged for his role in a $1.7 million optometry services scheme. In the District of Puerto Rico, civil demand letters were issued to 6 individuals for their roles in a scheme to defraud the Medicaid program. In addition, in the states of Florida, Iowa, South Dakota, Indiana, New York, Michigan, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Oregon, Kentucky and Alaska, 49 defendants have been charged in criminal and civil actions with defrauding the Medicaid program and 57 sites were searched, pursuant to search warrants. These cases were investigated by each state's respective Medicaid fraud control units. The cases announced today are being prosecuted and investigated by U.S. attorneys' offices nationwide, along with Medicare fraud strike force teams from the Criminal Division's Fraud Section and from the U.S. attorneys' offices of the Southern District of Florida, Eastern District of Michigan, Eastern District of New York, Southern District of Texas, Central District of California, Eastern District of Louisiana, Northern District of Texas, Northern District of Illinois and the Middle District of Florida, and agents from the FBI, HHS OIG, Drug Enforcement Administration, DCIS and state Medicaid fraud control units. A complaint or indictment is merely a charge, and all defendants are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. The court documents for each case will be posted online as they become available. Here, https://www.justice.governor/opa/documents and resources June 22, 2016 Medicare Fraud Strike Force Press Conference. The Affordable Care Act has provided new tools and resources to fight fraud in federal health care programs. The law provides an additional $350 million for healthcare fraud prevention and enforcement efforts, which has allowed the department to hire more prosecutors and the strike force to expand from 2 cities to 9. The act also toughens sentencing for criminal activity, enhances provider and supplier screenings and enrollment requirements, and encourages increased sharing of data across government. In addition to providing new tools and resources to fight fraud, the Affordable Care Act clarified that for sentencing purposes, the loss is determined by the amount billed to Medicare and increased the sentencing guidelines for the billed amounts, which has provided a strong deterrent effect due to increased prison time, particularly in the most egregious cases. Since January 2009, the Justice Department's Civil Division, along with U.S. attorneys' offices around the country, has recovered the total of more than $29.9 billion through False Claims Act cases, with more than $18.3 billion of that amount recovered in cases involving fraud against federal healthcare programs.
There were over 60,000 in total sent and received. About half were work-related and went to the State Department, and about half were personal that were not in any way related to my work.
When you speak to the public, you say, "I turned over everything." That's, for the most part, a direct quote. When you talk to the public, you say, "I turned over everything."
90 to 95% of my work-related emails were in the state system. If they wanted to see them, they would certainly have been able to.
You know what? That is maybe the 10th time you have cited that figure today.
It is.
And I have not heard anyone other than you ever cite that figure. Who told you that 90 to 95% of your emails were in the State Department system? Who told you that?
We learned that from the State Department in their analysis of the emails that were already on the system.
The Inspector General report found that less than 1% of State Department emails, record emails, were captured. So they give a number of less than 1%, and you give a number of 90%.
Interest in Libya in 2012.
The server contains personal communications from my husband and me.
Only time I got on the internet, I did 2 emails, and I ordered Christmas presents from a reservation. Otherwise, I found people said embarrassing things on emails. I didn't want to be one of them.
I mean, and how many angels dance on the head of a pin? I have really nothing to. I mean, how do you answer that?
represented Wall Street as a senator from New York, and I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out. Quit foreclosing on homes. Quit engaging in these kinds of speculative behaviors.
Now, who's exactly to blame for the housing crisis? I think there's plenty of blame to go around. Home buyers who paid extra fees to avoid documenting their income should have known they were getting in over their heads.
Of course, we have to deal with the problem that the banks are still too big to fail. We can never let the American taxpayer and middle-class families ever have to bail out the kind of speculative behavior that we saw. But we also have to worry about some of the other players. AIG, a big insurance company, Lehman Brothers, an investment bank. There's this whole area called shadow banking. That's where the experts tell me the next potential problem could come from. So I'm with both Senator Sanders and Governor O'Malley in putting a lot of attention. I represented New York, and I represented New York on 9/11. When we were attacked, where were we attacked? We were attacked in downtown Manhattan, where Wall Street is. I did spend a whole lot of time and effort helping them rebuild. That was good for New York, it was good for the economy, and it was a way to rebuke the terrorists who had attacked our country.
9/11 was bad.